What a wonderful turnout, and you see East London's a very special place, because when we have something special to offer you, everybody comes along. And so this is a lovely evening. And to begin with, I want to just say I've been away for 3 months, and the committee, we have a most superb Border Historical Society committee who carry an enormous load with all sorts of things, but this is really rather special. And this evening, it's the Mark Taylor Memorial Lecture. We in fact always think of Mark Taylor because he was he was a chap who was instrumental in getting the Historical Society going in the beginning, and we have some honoured guests. We have Helen Bosworth-Smith with us, who is also a founder member, and she's one of our very special Life Vice Presidents. And we've also lost in the last year and a half 2 very important people in the form of Marge Courtney-Latimer, who was a wonderful person and was with us for very many years. You all know that she died last May. And we also lost Brian Watson, who was of similar status. And we're sad that this evening we're missing the presence of Blake Dalrymple, who also is one of our very special members. And well into his 90s, he does what he can, but sadly wasn't able to be with us this evening. So we do think of them. There are just a couple of things I want to say before we start the evening, and Jill is then able to do the introduction of our very special guest. I want you to know that the Border Historical Society and Friends of the Museum together present Take a Tram, an illustrated talk on the trams of early East London by Dennis Jenkinson. This will be on Tuesday the 18th of October. So if you'd like to bear that in mind, I think there again we'd have a fascinating talk. So there it is, Tuesday 18th of October, 7:30 p.m, and it's presented by the Friends of the Museum and our Border Historical Society. That's the point. The second thing is, we're not going to in any way come up in opposition to the evening, but I want you to know that though some of you aren't aware perhaps, but our society produced this book and it's dedicated to Marge Courtney-Latimer. There will be a limited number. We have 300 printed at the moment, but it will be limited. The price is 100 rands at the moment. Wait a few months and we may reduce it, but there we are. We hope not to. It's a very special book, and with very special articles inside.
Put the price up.
And the story of Marge Courtney-Latimer.
Put the price up.
And if in fact anyone would like to order a copy, there's a page here. Please put your names down and we'll see that you are helped later on. That's just a small thing, but because there are so many of you here who perhaps aren't aware of this, it is the magazine of our society. And we've got some wonderful, wonderful photographs in and articles from a number of sources. So there it is, and the list will be here. Now, I think that's it. I've said what I wanted to say as quickly as possible. And now I'm going to ask Jill Vernon to introduce our guest speaker. Thank you, Jill.
Well, I think what we're showing Hazel here is the tremendous interest there is in our own local history, the Transvaal history, and I think the very special contribution which he has made to the literature, the historical literature of the Eastern Cape. And so it's my very pleasant duty to welcome Hazel and to say how much we appreciate the fact that she's come all the way to talk to us. The Sunburnt Queen, as I'm sure most of you know, has been listed for the Alan Paton, it was shortlisted for the Alan Paton Non-Fiction Award. Many of us think it ought to have won, but we weren't asked. But anyway, it was at least recognised as, I think, a major contribution to the South African literature. Her book, meticulously researched, a very engaging style, so those of you who say they don't like reading history have all thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. Hazel was born in Pietermaritzburg. She said she moved around a lot, her family moved around a lot, but she went to university there, where she didn't study literature, she studied fine art. And at the moment she actually does work in that field. She's a fine artist in the film industry and does various interesting points there. She has a very keen interest in the Eastern Cape, and I'm very happy to point out that her sons are probably responsible for her being here tonight, because she lives in Cape Town, but her one son is at school in Grahamstown, and he insisted on coming back to the Eastern Cape to be educated. And her other son is shortly going to be joining him. So I think we're really happy to have them fairly close to us. And Hazel has been able to combine a visit to us with a visit to her son. She has, I think, in the time that I've known her, a very inquiring mind. And what's more, she doesn't just inquire, she writes things down, she notes. And she won't tell us what they are, but she has another book, again, obviously in her research historical style, is being gestated at the moment. She's not sure when it's going to come about. And she also has another research project in mind. So we look forward to hearing those from you, Hazel. But meantime, my pleasure to introduce her. She's a bit worried. She says she doesn't have a very loud voice. So please excuse her, she says, and we don't have a microphone here. And we're also sorry that the museum hasn't finished their new March called Latimer Hall, because that's where we should be. But it's looking very good, and so hopefully it'll be open quite soon. And next time we'll be in more comfort. But welcome, Hazel, and thank you very much for coming.
Thanks. I'm really worried that you won't be able to hear me at the back. But then on the other hand, I don't have terribly profound things to say, so if you can't, just make it up. But seriously, if you can't hear me and you do want to hear, just let me know and I'll try to project a little bit better, okay? I didn't know who I was coming to speak to, so I thought most of you probably hadn't read the book. So what I'm going to do is to talk about the book, so if you've already read it, I'm sorry, I'm wasting your time. Sorry, I thought that was fun. Hi everyone, it's nice to see you all. Excuse me for that. I'm one of a pathetic majority who are terrified of public speaking. But I've been told that there are ways and means of overcoming the fear of death by audience. One friend's advice to me was just to imagine that the audience is totally stark naked. So, as I said, it's fantastic to see you. Living in and around East London, as most of you probably do, I guess you're all familiar with the Wild Coast. You probably also know that there are entire clans of people living along the Wild Coast and scattered throughout the Eastern Cape who are descended from the survivors of shipwrecks. One of these clans is the Amamolo, whose descendants are Indian castaways. Another and perhaps better known clan are the Abelungu. Now, as the Xhosa speakers amongst you will know, Abelungu means the whites, yet the Abelungu are black. The story of these black whites is intimately bound up with the nature of the Wild Coast, and the very name of the place suggests why. South Africa is surrounded by sea on three sides. Its sea routes are a shipping superhighway and have been for hundreds of years. This highway has some of the most extreme weather in the world, especially along the eastern seaboard. The stretch we call the Wild Coast is particularly prone to terrifying storms, and in addition it is dotted with hidden reefs, practically devoid of natural harbours, and subject to strange and capricious currents. And as if that's not enough, Wild Coast is one of only a few places in the world that has true freak waves. And we're not talking here about the so-called freak waves that knock fishermen off the rocks in places like Bessie's Bay in the Western Cape. We're talking about gigantic freaks of nature, 5 to 6 stories high, capable of breaking the back of a large ship and sending it to the bottom in a matter of minutes. The upshot of all this is that the Wild Coast has become a ship's graveyard. It is notorious for its wrecks. Less well known, perhaps, are the stories of its survivors. Is everybody kind of okay and not bored and you can all hear me? The Sunburnt Queen is the story of one of these castaways. It is a true story, and it's about a little girl called Bessie, who was shipwrecked on the Wild Coast about 250 years ago. Bessie was one of just thousands and thousands of people of all nationalities who were cast away on the shores of the Eastern Cape over the centuries. Most of her stories have been lost forever, but by a double fluke of history, Bessie's has not. Her ship was wrecked at a place called Lambassie Bay, which is better known nowadays as Port Grosvenor, after the famous English East Indiaman and its legendary treasure which sank there half a century later than her ship. The wild coast appears to have hotspots that attract more than their fair share of wrecks, and this may be one of them. Its most recent victim, I think, was called the BBC China, which went around there about a year or so back, and you may have seen it on the news. Bessie was adopted by the Amapondo people. She grew up to be a woman of great beauty and wisdom, and she married a man called Sengo, who was an Mpondo prince and chief of the Amachumani clan. They lived in those days at Ngazana, just south of Port St. John's, and it is there that Bessie lies buried. As many of you probably know, Ngazana is just one river down from the popular holiday resort of Ngazi River Bungalows. Bessie and her husband had several children, at least 5 of whom lived to adulthood. The Sunburnt Queen follows Bessie's story, and those of her children and her children's children, and an assortment of other strange and wonderful runaways, robbers, rascals, and very, very few role models who made this country what it is today. It covers a big chunk of Eastern Cape history, sticking its fingers into all kinds of pies and grubbing about in the dirt whenever it can. I think the latter is very important. I'm very strongly against officially sanctioned or sanitized history. We've all lived through apartheid, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But by way of illustrating my point, I'd like to read to you a letter written in 1907 by a woman called Eliza Conway of Elective. Eliza Conway was the great-great-granddaughter of the white castaway Bessie and her black prince Sango. She was, in other words, a colored woman, the living embodiment of miscegenation. It's an interesting word, by the way, because there's no such word as miscegenation. Anyway, Eliza had been asked by an amateur historian, William Basley, to find out more about her origins. And this is what she wrote, or rather what remains of what she wrote, because her letter was censored by a later hand. I'm going to read it to you with the censorship in it. Okay, so it might sound a bit confusing, but hang on there. Dear Mr. Basley, dear Sir, I have the opportunity to write these few lines according to my promise. But I needed a long time through trying a chance to find out some particulars. So I must say I sent my brother over to one fellow named Falilanga. Well, Falilanga says the servant girl and the lady what was married to Sango, that servant girl gets married to one of Sango's big councillors. And words torn out. Says that's about all, words torn out. This lady Sango's words torn out. And about the others, words torn out. Falilanga says she, words torn out. Married to another petty chief. But the name of that petty chief I don't know, for I am unable to go about myself. I had to do it very gradually, for the natives were getting frightened to tell me about this words torn out anymore. They say the words torn out, people, will take them words torn out. And I'm sorry I delayed you so long. This man, Falilanga himself, was a grandchild of a servant girl. He knows all, so if you can come down again, we can try to see him. For I am only by myself. Yours, E. Conway. Now, I get completely irritated every time I read this. I hate to think that because of some unknown person, motivated by racial prissiness, we and our children and our children's children are deprived of a part of our history, and this happens all the time. So I say, bring on the dirt. If nothing else, it makes history more important, more fun. The Sunburnt Queen is not a normal history book, as I'm sure those of you who have read it can know. Writing it sometimes felt like riding a very strong-willed and independent-minded mule. Someone once said to me that reading it was a big adventure. And I loved that, because that's what writing it was for me. It's been a labour of love. It took about 10 years of research and writing, and thousands of kilometres of travelling to put together. And included moving my kids from Johannesburg to the Eastern Cape for a couple of years. And I feel emotional about that because now they're coming back. I should mention, though, that their cooperation was almost entirely by default. Nowadays, I have to ask them before dragging them off somewhere. Recently, I said, "Hey guys, I've had a brilliant idea. Let's move to Zimbabwe for a year." Thank God. Thank God they were too young to have any say when I first started writing this book, or it may never have been written. Well, I'm not going to bore you guys anymore. Thanks for coming. It's an honor to be here with you all. And thanks to Jill Vernon and the Historical Society for having me.
Well, before I ask Patrick Hutchison to say thank you, let's see whether you'd like to ask any questions, because I'm quite certain that anything you'd like to put to her in mind.
I was kidding when I said no, I promise.
Any questions?
This is not a question. Many years, when I say many years ago, about 20 years ago, I was ripping. I went into a doctor's surgery in Lusiki, and it was quite amazing because you're going to these things all day. I used to call on about 10 doctors a day, dispensing doctors. Walked into this particular one, and there was this woman in her traditional dress with the old white skirt, the rip-rack braiding on it, brass rings around her ankles, around her neck, around her arms, sort of a stole around her shoulders, and a big turban. And she was whiter than anybody in this room. Blue eyes. She was far paler than anybody in this room. I was absolutely shocked at this. I mentioned it to the doctor. He said, well, she lived in the Lusiki area all her life, and she must have been all of 80 years old. It was quite fascinating.
And it wasn't just white castaways coming in, Indian castaways. It was probably also a lot of white traders who was married with them and started product, because that's also something that's been sort of subdued and hidden in our history, is that just about every single trader going up the coast was married back home and had children.
This particular doctor, incidentally, so was then considered a colour man. And his name That's just a little pass it on.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
What it's worth.
Hazel, I wanted to just ask you where he comes from. And he was very, very excited about this. Absolutely amazed. And I feel that, in your book, you have a sort of a tendency of stopping way back. How about the present generation that still exists? How about carry on?
Okay, but this took me 10 years to do that. I think it's going to be for somebody else to do, quite frankly, but that's also why I footnoted everything so carefully, because it can be a kind of a springboard for whoever wants to take it further, perhaps yourself.
Well, in the future, if you want to do anything like that, you're welcome to stay.
Thanks.
We'll introduce you to quite a few of the
I'd love to meet him. I'm curious about his ancestry.
In fact, I thought he'd be here this evening because I went to the bishop to the opening of the Parliament building there. And then he said he's coming through because I stay in East London.
Yeah.
I told him about your talk and I said to him, come around at 7 o'clock. Well, obviously they didn't turn up, so I probably missed it.
Most of him in this side of the kind, so I'm curious to know what the connection.
No, there was that gap just across the car, and in Shona and tribe, we're given the right to settle there with
Was
part
it
of the
after
other
the
tribe.
No more copies, eh? Are they sold out?
Sold out.
Oak's making orders,
Yes? Yeah.
but they can't be signed orders.
No, they can't be signed, I'm afraid.
So those the last three. You think I should put the price up? Maybe make a profit there.
You can try.
Go for $2.50 each. We still got to get them signed, eh?
It's been a little occupied.
Oh, that's all right. I've got a question to ask you. Old display cabinets here, old photographs.
Yeah.
You're not involved much with this.
No, we're just here to sell the books.
Sell the book.
Yeah. A couple of,
How many Andes Thompson do you sell? One.
to you.
Yeah.
No, we had a couple of people, most of them stoners, coming to ask for